I'm Stephanie Kahn. Welcome to Friend of a Friend. I have a lot of creative friends. They make music, they make art, they make things, and they live beautiful lives. So I was thinking, I'm lucky enough to be able to talk to them or listen to their music whenever I want, but it might be nice to introduce them to other people, to all of you. So I started this podcast. Sometimes I'll be talking to friends about how and why they make what they do. Sometimes we'll hear their music or their poetry, or maybe we'll just experience whatever it is that they've created. Today I'm talking to Belgian musician Thomas Baeté. He plays bass viol and vielle, which is like a medieval fiddle. He plays a lot of early music before 1800, but he also plays folk music, and he's also a singer. He's just a wonderful musician, so expressive, and also just a lovely person. Before we listen to our conversation, let's hear a little bit of him playing vielle. This is Giranden Bel Falcon from a recording he made with his group Club Mediéval. Thomas, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being on it.
Glad to be here.
So you started out on violin, I
Yeah.
believe, right? But these days, I think you're more known as a vielle or viola da gamba, and you're playing music before 1800, right? And a singer.
Yeah, that's true.
So why do you think this is the repertoire that you're drawn to?
That's such a good question, but also such a difficult question to answer. And I cannot really give you a very precise answer, but I think somehow that music must relate really to who I am, what kind of a person I am. And it's been always like that. And that's really strange because when I was a kid and I was in the children's choir, like the songs that I really liked the most, and my favorite songs were the old songs, like the modal ones and the Renaissance ones. And of course, when I was a kid, I had no idea. I had no idea that they were Renaissance. It was just the songs from choir. I mean, when you're 8 years old, you don't have a concept of style or anything. But now afterwards, with hindsight, I see that those were the melodies that I really loved. So it's really crazy, and I don't know where it comes from really, but it resonates with me an awful lot, and it always has, and I think it always will.
Well, you also do traditional music, though, right?
Yeah.
Some. And I was wondering what do you think the relationship is between them? Like, you think there's some kind of overlap?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Of course, the let's say the early music that we play today is mostly we can play it because there are written sources. When we speak specifically, for instance, about medieval music, 90% of the music that was played back then, we don't have it anymore, and we will never have it back because it was improvised music, and it was dance music that was just part of the oral tradition, and
Hmm.
everybody knew it by heart, and there is no written traces of that. So when we do early music now, a lot of it is really what you would call, between inverted commas, high culture, like because of the fact that it's written down
Hmm.
and writing, and that writing meant that it was something of the nobility or of
Hmm.
the church. When we think about the Middle Ages in Europe, that is.
Hmm.
Um,
I was thinking about what you were saying too. Like a lot of it wasn't written down, and there's all this kind of, I wouldn't say it's not guesswork, but you have to
Yeah,
reconstruct in a way, right?
absolutely. And that's part of the work that I absolutely love about it, and that I really like about his music. The more you go back in time, the less information you have. So
Yeah.
it obliges you to do lots of research and to really
Yeah.
to try to really get to the core and the soul of that music, but also leave so much space to create your own world. I'm a creator, but I'm not a composer. So I don't compose stuff, but I love like writing extra parts, improvising stuff around the music. So I really get like to get my hands dirty and really work with the material in a very creative way.
Mm.
But I don't like starting from scratch somehow. I don't like starting from
There's a gray area in that kind of music. As you say, the further back you go, right? There's a bit of a gray area
yeah
between composer and, I mean, there's a bit of collaboration between the performer and the score. Like the score is, if there's anything, it's bare bones. I was thinking about
yeah
I guess it was last summer when we were driving and I played a tape by Donald McClellan. And for anyone
uh-huh
listening who doesn't know who that is, Donald McClellan was a accomplished fiddler in the Cape Breton tradition. But anyway, I put that on for you and I remember you saying, "Oh, his ornaments are so beautiful."
mm,
And I thought they are. And then so this is just reminding me that you wouldn't find any of his ornaments or things in the music. Like if you were to look that
yeah.
tune up and someone's written down the bare bones of the tune, it wouldn't have any of that in it either.
Exactly. And things like just the energy that you put in a piece. That is,
Mm.
I mean, it's such is the first thing that communicates to an audience, like what character, what energy you put in it, and that's not in those old scores. When you look at a piece from the 19th century, a composer will write, for instance, allegro, which means lively, or sad or all those kind of things, and you already have an idea of the tempo and the mood and
Mhm.
but for most of the music certainly before 1700 you have no idea what it is. And when you have a text, when it's vocal music, then you can start from the text.
I was just thinking also of the instruments that you're using that some
Hmm.
people might not be familiar with too, vielle and viola da gamba.
Yeah,
What do they make possible? Like why are you playing? Why? I mean, I know what I think about it, but what is it that draws you to using these instruments?
the viol, which is a Renaissance and a Baroque instrument, is like there is nothing like it afterwards. So it's a bit like a guitar because it's an instrument with six strings and frets, and you can play chords on it. But then it also has a bow, like a violin or a cello. There is not such an instrument in the 19th and 20th century. I mean, somebody tried to reinvent it and called it an arpeggione that was in Schubert's time, but it never caught on. So I think it's that for the gamba, it's for sure the mixture of the melodic and harmonic possibilities. You can play really beautiful melancholic melodies because it's such a melancholic sound, right? But at the same time, you can also play the bass and you can play harmonies, and so it's a very complete instrument. You can really play a piece by yourself and have like everything you want. You have the rhythm, you have the harmony, you have the melody, you have the bass, which you can also do on a guitar, but there you don't have a bow. So,
Mm,
and a bow
yeah.
for me, it's like the breath, it's like singing. And that's something I really want to be able to do as well. So I think it's just that instrument gives so much possibilities musically.
Yeah,
And
this
for the fill, it's just also just the sound. And then there's also some like just the physical action of bowing an instrument. It's such a nice thing. It's such a great feeling.
Let's listen to a little bit of you playing viola da gamba now. This is an excerpt from a live performance of you playing variations on Henry Purcell's O Solitude. listening to Friend of a Friend, and my guest today is Thomas Baeté.
So as a kid, so I started to play the violin, and it was really something that fitted my, like, what kind of kid I was, I think.
Like how?
I was into like fine motorics. I was quite asthmatic, so I was not really maybe made to play the oboe or an instrument where you have to breathe a lot and have lots of pressure in your head and something. And I liked songs, and the piano, for instance, was too much of an intellectual thing for me.
I do get that. Maybe it comes from being a singer too. Like I want to be able to create a line when I'm like, I play piano
Yeah,
too, but
yeah,
when I play an instrument that I can make a line with, like a taper, that's
yeah,
what I'm trying to say. Violin is, and viol and probably vielle, it's closer to human expression, maybe.
yeah. I think so. And on piano, it takes. I'm not a piano player, so you can tell me about this, but just to imitate a legato on piano, like to suggest a
I can't
singing
do it.
line.
I
It's
personally haven't achieved
wow.
it, but yeah, I think you're creating if you're Murray Pariah or something, right?
Yeah,
You're creating that illusion of legato, but
yeah,
it's never quite, it's not
exactly.
one unbroken line.
But you know what? It was a funny thing. My flatmate in Brussels is a lute player,
Uh-huh.
and we were discussing how we teach technique. And very often, I tell my students that the contact of the bow with the string should be as direct as when you do a pizzicato, like a plucked string, with your thumb, like that feeling of your thumb against the string, that contact you feel of the
Mhm.
string and your thumb. That is what you look for also with the bow, the same directness in contact. And she is a lute teacher, and she said, well, that's crazy, because what I tell my students is that every finger is like a bow.
Ah,
And so every
what?
finger it should feel like you're caressing the string, like a bow.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, well, I guess she's seeking more legato and you're seeking, you want articulation. You want to.
Yeah, that's true. For them, legato is the challenge, and for us, articulation is the challenge.
Speaking of teaching, like you have a book.
Yeah.
There's a lovely video online. It is called The Natural Violist, and it's beautiful. I mean, I've seen this gorgeous little drawings, and then
Mm,
people can click through and they can see you demonstrating it. Why, like, why,
mm.
why did you want to, why did you want to do that?
To survive COVID, basically, it was
Oh,
it
yeah.
was my COVID project. It was a crazy situation because I had accepted way too much work for that month of. It was March in Belgium when COVID hit, and I was kind of in a panic mode. I didn't know. I accepted to teach a new course at university as well about a subject I didn't know anything about. So I was in a complete panic, and then all of a sudden, the lockdown came, and I was euphoric because of the relief. And I had all that energy, and it was a beautiful spring in Belgium. And my friend Bram, who lives just down the road, is designer and an arts teacher, and he was also just sitting at home, not having anything to do. He was my gamba student at the time, and he's so incredibly talented in drawing, especially nature and animals and everything. And
Mhm.
so I've been teaching. I think for 20 years. I was quite young when I started, and since the beginning, my pupils and my students said, "But those exercises you give us and you scribble them on, like, on the back of a score or somewhere in the margins. Why don't you put them together in a little book?" And I always said, like, yeah, 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 one day I will do that.
Yeah.
And of course, I never did. But then I thought, well, with the lockdown, I said it's now or never. And
Yeah.
so I contacted all my students and said, well, go and look in all your scores and your archives and tell me what your exercises are that you can find back that I gave you that you found really useful. And so it was like a bit of a collaborative project
Right.
between
Yeah.
them and me. And so I filtered, and I wrote one exercise a day, and
Mm.
then I sent it to Bram, and Bram made a
And
drawing for it.
there's like 15
Yeah.
or so. It's not a ton. I mean,
No,
it's
it's
focused.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very focused, and it's as little text as possible. I wanted to have it very not too brainy, but beautiful, a little book to make it beautiful so that you really feel like looking at it and you come into a state of let's say in a state where you can manage concentration and where you yeah, just a place where you like to be and where you have the calm and the patience to do exercises that are repetitive and that asks
Yeah.
for a lot of observation of your own technique and being in contact with your body and all that kind of
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff.
I had a clarinet teacher that used to say, I guess I was stressed out with university, and he was my private music teacher at the time. And he said, think of your practice as like meditation, like there's two
Mm,
or 3 hours, whatever it is, where you don't have to do anything else. And the best thing to do
yeah,
is these repetitive, yeah,
yeah,
where you're just, as you said, you're so present, and it's almost like yoga or
yeah,
yeah, or meditation.
exactly. Don't you agree that like when you are university age, you it's very hard to see the value of that. But then when later in life, when you are like
Mhm.
really in the thick of it, and you have so many things you have to think about, and then there's now the digital age, and you have now when you can just study your instrument for 2 hours, it feels like such a God-given thing, right? It
It's
feels like
amazing.
such a gift.
But it's also like it looks like we were talking about how do you learn the style or how the instrument was supposed to sound or the
Yeah,
music. There were these old treatises, right? And the
yeah.
front page of yours looks, I mean, inside it doesn't read, I guess it kind of looks like illuminated manuscripts in a way, but the
Hmm,
front
hmm.
looks like very much like the natural viola, it looks like an old
Yeah.
treatise.
Is it inspired on a book by Christopher Simpson that was called The Division Violist? Because divisions is like a way
Oh yeah.
how to learn to improvise. And there's another one called The Complete Violist. But anyway, that's why I called mine the Natural Violist.
Uh-huh.
And then in the link with the animals, so every exercise is symbolized by an animal. So, like for instance, one exercise where it's very important that you leave all your fingers down as long as possible is illustrated by
Yeah.
a tree frog. You know, they have these fingers with suction cups on
Mm.
in the end.
Yeah, grabbing onto the tree or whatever. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's why I couldn't do that because I didn't have the right picture in mind. Oh, that was so hard to leave the fingers there.
Yeah. Just go
Uh,
to the dollar store and buy some suction cups for your
oh
fingers.
yeah, or just tape them.
Exactly.
So I was thinking about the first time we met. You were doing a concert with a friend of mine, Catherine Hill, and Joe Carew. It was the shuffle season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did this great mashup of early music and traditional music from different
Hmm.
places. It was just, it was a lovely show. But then you sang this one song in Flemish, and I found myself like I'm a little embarrassed, but I found myself, I was going to say moved, but it's more like I was sobbing uncontrollably and trying not to let anybody see this. And I thought, what's happening? And after I saw a friend of mine, she's a musician and she's a writer, and I said, that was lovely. And then she said, I was crying during this one
Hmm.
same
Hmm.
song. So then I remember you and do you remember this?
Oh. Oh, I do remember it. It was very intense for me.
We talked about it after,
Yeah.
and we were trying to figure out why it was that that had been so emotional. I wonder if you'd thought any more about that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I remember it well also because it was kind of a pivotal experience for me. Um, because of where I come from. So I was trained in this tradition of early music that is a bit how would I explain this? So my teacher was Wieland Keuken, and he and his brothers and Gustav Leonard, they were in this vibe of reconstructing early music. So that would be there was this idea that text was really important. So you had to go back to the source. There was this very intellectual vibe to it, and as a performer, you were actually kind of more like a messenger.
Like a
And so,
conduit, more than
yeah,
speaking for
exactly,
yourself.
exactly
Yeah.
that. So, you were kind of a craftsman, and you try to convey the idea of the composer. And for instance, if I would play without score, like by heart, it would not be very appreciated because then I would put myself too much forward. So there's a lovely element to it of craftsmanship, I find, which is beautiful, but at the same time, it's also it's something a little bit sterile or something that you have to just pass on the message of the composer. And basically you have to be very aware as a performer of which emotion you're trying to convey, but it's in a kind of abstract way, and you're not supposed to be engaged in that emotion. You're supposed to provoke it in your audience. So there is this, I don't know what the word is in English. In Italian, say distacco. It's like there's this kind of gap between the emotions you're trying to convey and what you are doing yourself.
I think
I,
people say a disconnect sometimes.
yeah, a disconnect. That's exactly it. And so at that moment, uh, that performance in St. Bart's, I think it was one of the first times for me that I really felt like that I can be in the emotion of the song and really feel it very deeply myself and feel that vibration in the audience, tell my personal story and connect, really, not a disconnect, but a connect with the audience. I felt that very strongly. And why it happened exactly,
That song had to be something to do with that particular song, right?
yeah, I think so. I think the fact that it's in my own dialect, like the language that my mother and my grandmother speak, that I was brought up in, West Flemish, and it's not very often that I get to sing in that particular language. So I think that was a big thing. So the song was called Moeder Cordula, and so it's a kind of very intense song. It's about her having 8 sons. Um, this is in the 19th century. Seven of them go to Canada, and only one of them ever returns.
It's
Um,
almost like it could be a
so
Gaelic song, frankly. Like,
yeah,
have 8 songs and 7 die.
yeah,
I remember thinking that at the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, but so it's also there's the content, it's the language. Yeah, because when I say moeder, it's how I call my own mother. It's not like saying maman or mutter or mother. So it feels very personal. So I think that there's for sure
Hmm.
some of that. But then there's also just like a kind of magical aspect to it. It's maybe how the light was and how the
The light is beautiful in that church, the way it kind of comes
yeah.
in on an angle through the windows. It's kind of soft or something.
Yeah, exactly. And another aspect I think was also that before we did some lighter song, funny songs, and so
Mm.
people maybe were in a very receptive state of mind for that. Like there was also an element of surprise,
Mm.
a little bit pris au dépourvu in French. I don't know how you say that in English. Like they were taken by surprise, maybe by the
Aha.
emotion.
It's so funny because you had sung that song before, I'm sure,
Hmm.
and maybe since. And isn't that kind of the magic of live performance? You don't, all these elements came together and caused a different in you, a different way of performing, and the audience a
Yeah,
different way of receiving.
that's it.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the magic of live performance. And that's why people keep going to concerts, even if they have all the
Mm.
perfect recordings on their shelves at home,
Mhm.
um, because something like this can happen. And it's also the beauty of something very vulnerable, and
Mhm.
and it's sometimes it's there, and sometimes you think all the conditions are right, but it doesn't happen. So it's a
Mm.
big mystery, and I'm so happy that mystery is still there. It can be
Yeah.
sometimes it can be very frustrating, but it's how it should be. And of course, I mean, if you're Taylor Swift and you do a, a show with 7,000 elements, of course you will wow the people. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
will be super impressive, and the effect will be there.
It's
Just
mechanized. It'll just be the same every, I mean, I'm sure she feels differently, something, but I think the impression will be the same every time, as you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But when it's just your little voice and a little fiddle,
Mm.
uh, because Catherine was accompanying me for
Oh
that song.
yes. And she
Um,
accompanied that so beautifully.
it was in a very sober way, but very
Mhm.
like just
Sparse.
the bare necessities, and I think it made it all the more effective. Actually, it made the text come out
Mhm.
all the better, I would say.
That makes me think also about making music with friends
Mm,
and how we met that way. I met Catherine Hill through singing music, and then sometimes you get to play music with friends for the first time that people you knew
uh,
before. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about the correspondence between regular relationships in life and musical relationships.
when you start playing together, it's such a strong connection,
Mm.
or not.
Or
It
not.
can,
Yeah, right. Disappointingly,
it's,
sometimes not.
isn't that strange? Sometimes it can be just a moment of bliss when you click with somebody in a musical way, or when your voices click and you just hear those overtones searing.
Mm. With singing, especially. I mean, I think that first time I met you, you came and sang in our choir, and I remember
Uh-huh.
thinking, "Oh, yeah, this is," it's one of those things when you think, "Oh, I can blend with this person," or, and you
Yeah.
become one section, not two
Yeah.
different people.
Yeah, it's a thing also of deep listening, and
Hmm.
when does that really happen? It's not very often, but it's when that deep listening happens, and then an extra thing is then when you also feel that the person can react to what you do, and that
Hmm.
you can react to what the other person is doing, and like go with their timing, or adapt to their voice color or whatever, or to their timbre of their instrument. And I think that's why I'm a musician as well, too, for those
Right.
moments. And like I'm thinking now of a moment that we had in Bruges with a singer, Olaya Alemán. She's a Spanish singer, and we've been working together for quite a long time. And it was this kind of moment where it was just the slightest tilt of her head and like a kind of look in her eyes that I caught, and I just knew exactly what she was going to do. It's something we completely didn't rehearse, but it was a completely, we both felt like that moment asked for it, and I knew that she was going to do something special for the timing and do a very free ornament, and that I had to be there to
Yeah.
um, got that electricity going, really.
If there's someone you play with habitually, you start to have little, almost like your ESPs working, I always joke about. But that's what happened with you and the singer. It was like you weren't thinking consciously, right? It was like a subconscious, your brain filled in, and
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
you went
It's
together to the next thing.
exactly. It was like
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of state of bliss that you once in a while you have it during a performance when you feel just the music is happening and you just have to hop on and go with the ride. That's already happening. It's the music is happening and you just have to hook your little wagon on that train or something, or it's those are moments of bliss, and sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't happen, but that's one of the wonderful things of being a performer, I think.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being on the show,
Well,
for
thank you,
talking.
Stephanie, for inviting me. It was a great pleasure.
Hope to see you again, maybe in Cape Breton. Maybe, who knows?
Absolutely.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
That was my conversation with Thomas Baeté. You can find out more about him on his website, thomasbaete.be, and Baeté is spelled Baete. I'll put that information in the show notes, as well as a list of all the music that I played today. And I can't thank Thomas enough for taking time out of his vacation to talk to me, and we spoke over Zoom. Thank you again so much for listening to Friend of a Friend. I have a special music episode coming up in a couple of weeks, Sad Songs, in which I'll be indulging my own love of that kind of thing and also inviting some friends to share their favorites. I hope you'll tune in. Bye for now. Let's end with some more music from Thomas Baeté.